Welcome to the Workbench and welcome to another episode of Wheels Wings TV. Today, in conjunction with the review of the new Airfix 1/72nd scale Mk.Vc Spitfire, we have the KP models 1/72nd scale Mk.Vc Spitfire. Let's have a look. So if you haven't already, pause this video and go have a look at our inbox review for the Airfix kit so you'll know what we're talking about when we draw reference to this one. We can wait. First sprue, we've got our fuselage halves, our tailplanes, slipper tank, propeller spinners, wheels, and whatnot. Nicely recessed panel lines in this kit. Definitely a little bit crisper, more crisp than the Airfix ones. And definitely a lot more rivet/fastener detail than the Airfix kit has, especially around some of these small panels. The Airfix kit's just panel lines. KP actually go and put a lot of the fasteners. The Zus fasteners are definitely a little bit more pronounced, including some of the really small little filler caps and access points. Actual little bit of sort of a hint of a hinge detail around the pilot's door. So the surface detailing is definitely a little bit nicer than the Airfix kit. Fabric texture is done a little bit differently. We got a little bit more of a raised rib. But once again, we got little fastener details around those access points. We get two types of main wheels with the 5-spoke or with the covered wheel. And these are night and day from the Airfix kit. Much more definition, much sharper and deeper detail on these wheels compared to the Airfix kit. This does share parts with their 5B kit, so we do have some different propeller spinners. You got the really long pointy one, the short pointy one, and the short stumpy one. We've got our radiator. This does not have the separate flap that the Airfix kit does. No big deal. You got some of our various little cockpit bits molded separately, and definitely, like even the pitot tube is a much finer molding than the Airfix kit. The actual pitot point, or the tube, is actually much finer. The Airfix one is almost thick as the mounting stem. Control yoke is very nicely done. Technically only has the single button molded on. The 5 B's and C's would have had a big square button, but I mean, we're talking about something that's less than 1 millimeter square. Tail wheel is a little bit slimmer than the Airfix one. Now the landing gear legs, definitely a big difference. Much more detail with the various, layers, I guess you could say. Much more detail, much sharper. Instrument panel comparable. The Airfix instrument panel is quite nice. I will say this one's a bit sharper. So if you would prefer to hand paint that rather than Decals, this one will probably look a little bit better. We do have two types of exhaust stacks. We got the fishtail, and we got the more, atypical like Mark 1 style exhaust. Doesn't have the separate little heater duct pipe, but that of course can be easily added. Got some of our frame for the seat molded in. We actually have some of the lightning holes in the frame molded in, unlike the Airfix kit. We got two different oil coolers. These are a little more basic than the Airfix kit because these are molded in one piece. The Airfix one is molded in 2 halves. That just comes down to separate engineering choices. And we do have separate clipped wingtips. KP have much more detail molded to the inner faces of the fuselage halves. Not all of it is exceptionally sharp, but I'd say there's probably more there than in the Airfix kit. And we've got the Orlikin, we got the earlier type cannons for the 5B, and we even have two different types of rear vision mirror for the pilot, the little round one and the square one. You know, typical with short run, we got some big ejector pins, but pretty much in places we're not going to see them, so no fuss there. That looks really good. Next sprue. Now, these wing surfaces are for the Mk.V. So if you build a lot of Spitfires, hold on to these parts. You can use them on something else. But we do have three different types of propeller. So we got the big wide-bladed wooden ones that you see on a lot of Mk.Vs. Then we have the smaller cored metal propellers. We've got our rudder, once again with some nice fabric rib texture on there. We got various little humps and bumps for the wing surfaces. We got our faces of our radiators with a nice grill texture molded in. We got our tropical air intakes and our more conventional lower cowling with some nice fastener texture molded on with our Zeus fasteners around the edge. We got our, can't call it a cockpit floor, but the lowermost portion of the cockpit with the rudder pedals molded in. Oxygen bottles and the pilot's seat. This doesn't have as noticeable a big cushion as the Airfix one does. But what detail we do have here is nice, clean, crisp, lots of fastener detail, a lot more detail in the center section here than the Airfix kit has. But we're not too concerned with these wings because we're not using them. We're using this set of wings. So big thing with the Mk.Vc, of course, you could have 4 cannons or 2 cannons and 4 machine guns. So we've got all of our various ports here. Now these are not molded open like the Airfix kit. And in fact, the outer cannon bay has the piece but does not have the ejection port open. So you do have a little bit of work to do there. But the surface detailing, I will say, is much nicer than the Airfix kit. Very sharp. Like, all those little fasteners, rivets, screw heads, whatever they are. Much nicer than the Airfix kit on the upper and the lower wing. Nice, deeper panel line where the aileron meets the wing, whereas the Airfix kit, that's all the same type of line. A little bit of texture, but nothing, just kind of a matte finish, not like a glossy texture. We do have the large cannon bulge or the small cannon bulge. And I believe this sprue is shared with their Mark 9 kits, so we do have the 6 stack exhausts that you'd see on a Mark 9. And we have our cannon barrels. Now, these are molded separately and plug into the wing, unlike the Airfix kit that are molded integral. These are a little kludgy looking, so you would definitely want to replace those with some brass ones, but comparable to the Airfix kits, and definitely be easier to replace if you wanted to. So that's really nice. And our one little clear sprue, we have our canopy molded all in one piece, so no real option for having this open unless you want to cut it open. In that case, you might want to just invest in a vac form replacement. Now the lower part of the windshield is molded with some of the fuselage in place, so if there's any fit issues, you're getting those away from the clear. Not as clean, I will say, as the Airfix one. pretty much the exact same amount of distortion, but a little bit more, you know, mold marks, or, you know, very, you know, you know, you can see all these swirls and, hey, you know, little lines and stuff throughout the plastic. I think that's just from picking up from the molds. And we do have the gun sight molded in 2 halves, so we do have the little line down the middle. This has a square glass on it instead of the round glass, so this might be more typical for a Mark 9 than a 5, but I mean, little details like that we're not too worried about. So that's not too bad. Decals come on 2 pieces. Now, I've already been at this one for some of these decals for another build. Decals, they look kind of ugly. Big chunks of clear printed on them, but they are very thin, and I can say they do lay down well. Color printing on some of these is a little... It looks like something done on like an inkjet printer, so you can see all the little dots of color. It's kind of more apparent on the yellow than the blues and the whites. The whites are done very, very nice. The white letters and the black go down really nice. But some of these colors, just, they look homemade. So I usually would replace these, at least with your roundels. And they do give you some high contrast gauges there and a few little bits of seat belt. And of course these are printed by KP themselves. And then this is your stencils. So you've got your wing walks, your various little warning labels and whatnot. Walk here, don't walk here, fuel here, oil there. These are, I'm not sure where these are printed. Wouldn't be surprised if they farm this out to maybe Edward or Special Hobby or somebody like that, another Czech company. These look more in line with what we like to see with decals. In our instructions, little historical blurb. And this is, they actually tell you all the guys that actually worked on this kit. So you know who is the production coordinator, who did the box art, who did the instructions. That's a nice little nod to the people that make these things happen. And they actually list what references they used, I'm assuming, for the color schemes for this kit. So, you know, if you're like, well, hey, are you sure that, you know, this, what color was that? Well, they're going to be like, well, hey, we got it from this book, so take it up with them. Cool. A little bit more simplified than Airfix and a little bit more condensed. We get our sprue guide up here, which is always good, and lots of parts X'd out that we're not using for this particular build with these particular schemes. So we've got an instrument panel with the optional decal if we want, and nice color callouts throughout, which are actually spelled out and not just vague Humbrol numbers, which means I have to go grab a catalog and look them up. Interior green, red, brown, black. Thank you. Seat, armor plate, the frame, that all comes together with the floor. Seat goes in place. Optional decal if you so choose. Propeller with the spinner and the back plate. Got our oil cooler with a separate piece for the front. Landing gear legs going on to landing gear doors. Our wheels. Cockpit goes in. Now, because these are short run kits, there are limitations, so they require you to cut some blanking plates or backing plates for the exhaust. These exhaust pipes have something to glue into. So make a 15mm by 3.5mm piece out of plastic, make 2 of them, glue them in. No big deal. Fuselage halves go together, gun sight goes in. The inner portion of the landing gear bays are separate pieces. They go in. Your upper wing halves go on. Radiator, oil cooler, pitot tube. Now this particular boxing for the 4 guns over Malta are all 4 cannons, so we got the big wing bulges. 4 cannon barrels go in. Fuselage goes on, canopy goes on, tail planes, rudder, wheels, exhaust stacks, tropical filter, prop, and a finished Spitfire. So, not as involved as the Airfix instructions, but I'd say these are clear nonetheless. The only part that can get a little annoying is the parts are not numbered on the actual sprues, so you are going to be consulting your sprue map here quite a bit. Calls out for part 28. You're going to be like, well, I'm looking for this little D-shaped thing, and then go hunting for it, so that can slow you down a little bit. But I'd say these are just as clear and just as informative as the Airfix instructions. And the marking guide, which is on the back of the box. So kind of neat because you can see exactly what paint options you get while you're looking at the kit in the store. This one, of course, is 3 different Malta Spitfires, all 4 cannon aircraft. One from Operation Bowery, which was the 3rd delivery of Spitfires on the Wasp. This one on the 2nd delivery, and then this one was also an Operation Bowery aircraft. That could have been the 3rd or the 4th delivery. And 4 interpretations of color schemes for those Malta Spitfires. So the KP models, 1/72nd scale Mk.V.C Spitfire. On the surface, definitely a nice, clean, crisp looking kit. I would say the surface details are superior to the Airfix one. Airfix, being a mainstream kit, is definitely cheaper and is going to be the easier to build, but will the KP kit render the nicer finished model? So if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe so you do not miss our head-to-head cage match between the Airfix and the KP Mk.V.C Spitfires. Thank you very much. We'll catch you next time.